So I'm just going to be going through some of my thoughts while listening to the Gulag Archipelago by Aleksandr Solzhenitsyn. Um, I've come to the book, as I think many have recently, on the recommendation of Dr. Jordan Peterson, who I'm going to talk about in another video, and he's had a quite an impact on my thinking as of late. But as far as this book goes, about 5 hours into it, you can find the audiobook on YouTube. It's about 70 something hours long, so you think it might be a slog, but once you get into it, it really catches you because it has a way of putting you in that place. Um, the first things I noticed was um, the obvious influence on how the Soviet Union influenced the writing of 1984, the ideas of doublethink and the Ministry of Truth, rewriting history. Um, there's one part in the book where Solzhenitsyn is talking about a train engineer, and this guy proposes that they double or triple the loads on trains that trains can carry, just to increase their ability to move things around. And he was accused of trying to sabotage the train tracks. So there was this idea. We'll back that up. What happened was, when the revolution started, the Soviets started rounding up productive workers. That included farmers, engineers, people working in industry. The most productive were seen as the part of the oppressors, right? They were the most successful. They were, obviously, because of their success, it meant they were oppressing people. So they rounded those people up and either killed them or threw them in the gulag. Um, so this guy was proposing an improvement on the train, and they said he was a wrecker. The idea of a wrecker was, well, we're having these problems in industry and farming, wherever else. We're having all these problems. So obviously, it's not that our system is messed up. It's that it must be saboteurs from the inside, people fighting Mother Russia from the inside, not believing in the revolution and the Marxist ideas. So they started just rounding up more and more people. And this guy was one of them. So because of his proposal on the trains, he was put in a gulag. Well, a few years later, somebody else proposed the exact same thing. And this person was called a great innovator. Their proposal was applauded, and anybody that spoke out against his idea, any other engineer, was called a limiter, somebody that's trying to limit Soviet glory and expansion. And they were rounded up. So you see this in 1984, this idea of we were always at war with East Asia and we were always allied with Eurasia. Minute in the middle of the speech, it flips. We're always allied with this side and we've always been at war with this side. And Orwell didn't just make that up. That came from the Soviet Union. There's even, you can find photos. I remember seeing one where Stalin had someone eliminated, and this was somebody higher up in the government, because there's a picture of Stalin walking with this person, and then there's the same picture with that person completely removed, painted out of the picture. It's a pretty amazing picture considering it's so pre-Photoshop. Um, and the book also it starts to heavily go into interrogation techniques, what they use to force confessions out of people and get them to turn over other people. And you have the obvious, people torture movies, you've always got the hot pokers, and that was actually something they did. It was called an internal brand, where they would basically shove a hot poker up somebody's ass, or grab a guy and have somebody spread his legs on the floor and have somebody stomp his testicles into dust. And that's the kind of torture you see in movies a lot, and it's obviously horrific, not doubting that. But what gets me is things like lock somebody in a box for 2 days that's infested with bed bugs. And maybe that comes from, I've had back issues in the past, and one just recently was especially bad, lower back, where so you're trapped in a place and it's excruciating pain and you can't move. No matter which way you move, it just makes it worse. But even where you're laying, it's the pain's so bad you can't stand it, and then you just start to feel like you're trapped in this place forever and you can't get out and there's nothing you can do about it. And having experienced a little bit of that, I really you can imagine the horror of, say, having to in a stand in a box that's just big enough for you and just not be allowed to lay down for 2 days straight, not be allowed to sleep, or just being thrown into a mud pit for 3 days, being fed 3.5 ounces of bread and a tiny cup of water, and just standing there in the mud in your own feces. Um, it shows how far people can go to support the ideologies they've really latched onto, and how they can twist their own minds to such an extent. And it really is scary. There was one kind of funny moment, and it reminded me of Kim Jong Il died a few years ago. How you had thousands of people in the square, all just had to be just open weeping. Um, if you weren't People that weren't crying hard enough got taken off to whatever horrific fate they had, probably a work camp. I mean, it seems like all of them live in work camps of some sense, some sort of another. But there was an instance where there was this big gathering in the Soviet Union, some kind of award ceremony, and somebody, said, "Oh, well, stand of applause for Stalin, the great leader." So everybody has to stand and clap really hard, but they can't stop. They can't stop clapping. And then it goes on for 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, stretching out to 11 minutes, because nobody wants to be the first one to stop, because somebody will notice if you are. And it kind of, and this is taken from directly from an account from someone that was there, and how he's joking about how the people in the back, they could kind of get away with clapping a little less and a little less hard, but they still had to be clapping, but the people in front really had to be going for it, and their arms are about to fall off, but they have to keep going. And then finally, after about 11 minutes, nonstop thunderous applause for Stalin, a guy who was head of a factory finally definitively, does his last clap and sits down, and almost instantly everybody else does too, with relief. Well, the next day, that guy is pulled aside, and hey, why did you stop clapping first? Never stop clapping first. And he was taken to prison. But yeah, I'm gonna be going through a lot of books. I have other things to talk about, but I figure this is a good way to kind of remember what you're listening to or reading. Uh, kind of go over it in your mind. Help me remember a lot of things I'm learning. So there'll be more to come.